The focus of the war in Ukraine has shifted south to the Zaporizhia front, a sector that in recent weeks has seen some of the heaviest fighting yet, received comparatively little international attention. Between January and early February, this area recorded between 180 and 250 clashes per day, accounting for roughly 20% of total frontline engagements. Russian forces had claimed advances in the Zaporizhia region after more than 2 months of sustained operations across the steppe. However, in February 2026, those reported gains were erased in the span of just 7 days. For over 60 days, Russian units conducted continuous artillery bombardments, armored assaults, and repeated infantry attacks along key axes near settlements including Paul and Alexandrovka. Since November 2025, units under the Vostok grouping had applied steady pressure, aiming to weaken Ukrainian defenses, disrupt logistics, and establish staging grounds for a larger summer offensive. The effort produced only limited territorial changes measured in meters, with trench systems carved incrementally across the muddy terrain. In early February, the situation reversed. According to battlefield reports, the Ukrainian 24th Mechanized Brigade, known as the King Danilo Brigade, was redeployed under Operational Command South. Within 7 days, Ukrainian forces regained between 9 and 9.5 kilometers of depth in areas previously taken by Russian troops over a 2-month period. Russian units were forced to abandon trenches, ammunition depots, and command posts established during the winter campaign. Among the Russian formations involved were elite airborne units of the VDV, Marine Infantry Brigades redeployed from Vladivostok, and motorized rifle formations providing armored support. Despite their status, these units reportedly faced coordination difficulties under Ukrainian artillery pressure. Several armored vehicles were left behind during the withdrawal. Ukrainian forces, by contrast, employed combined arms tactics aligned with NATO standards, integrating infantry, tanks, and drone operators. The 24th Mechanized Brigade advanced alongside the 24th Mountain Assault Brigade and special operations elements of the Border Guard. The Ukrainian counteraction began not as a full-scale offensive, but as a tactical counterattack. Russian forces defending near the Yanchur River anticipated frontal assaults. Instead, Ukrainian special units maneuvered along the river, using it as an axis of advance, and struck Russian flanks. The shift in initiative occurred during the week of February 8th to 16th, when Ukrainian forces disrupted what had been described as a gradual Russian tightening of positions around Uliupoli, considered a southern stronghold. This development represents more than a localized territorial adjustment. Military analysts describe it as a turning point in momentum on the southern front. Russian forces required over 60 days to advance. Ukrainian forces required 7 to reverse those gains. The regained depth of approximately 9.5 kilometers has altered operational calculations in the region and raised questions about the sustainability of Russian preparations for a broader summer campaign. While international coverage has remained focused on the Donbass, the events in Zaporizhia highlight a significant shift in tempo and control in the south. The confrontation there has pitted elite Russian formations against experienced Ukrainian brigades in a battle shaped not only by artillery and armored units, but also by maneuver, coordination, and battlefield technology. The consequences of this reversal are now unfolding across the wider southern theater. The core of the reversal on the Zaporizhia front unfolded through a combination of maneuver warfare, night operations, and the disruption of Russian command and control systems. According to field reports, the majority of the Ukrainian counterattack was conducted after dark. This timing proved decisive. Ukrainian armored vehicles, including U.S.-supplied Bradley infantry fighting vehicles and Swedish CV-90 platforms assigned to the 24th Mechanized Brigade, operated with advanced thermal optics that allowed crews to detect targets at distances where opposing forces were unable to respond effectively. Russian T-72 and T-80 tanks, particularly non-modernized variants deployed in the sector, faced limitations in night combat capability. Ukrainian units reportedly engaged Russian armored positions under cover of darkness, striking from ranges at which Russian crews could not visually identify incoming fire. As Russian commanders attempted to determine the source of attacks via radio, Ukrainian gunners were already targeting engines and defensive positions identified on thermal systems. Observers describe the engagement not as a prolonged exchange, but as a rapid technological overmatch during critical hours. Compounding battlefield pressure was a communications breakdown affecting Russian units in the area. Reports indicate that Russian formations operating in the sector lost access to satellite internet connections, including terminals reportedly used to transmit drone feeds and coordinate artillery fire. When commanders lost real-time drone imagery, they were unable to relay precise targeting data to supporting batteries or maintain awareness of adjacent units' positions. Ukrainian forces, maintaining secure communications, continued to transmit coordinates to artillery units within seconds of drone reconnaissance. Ukrainian drones identified Russian positions and directed artillery fire with speed and accuracy. Russian frontline elements, according to multiple accounts, found themselves without clear orders or reinforcement during critical moments of the Ukrainian push. Military bloggers on Russian platforms referenced electronic warfare pressure and satellite connectivity disruptions, describing frontline units as effectively blind and isolated. In several sectors, armored Ukrainian units advanced while Russian radio traffic fell silent. Operationally, the Ukrainian advance unfolded along multiple axes. The first axis followed the Yanchur River, which Russian forces had considered a natural defensive barrier. Ukrainian troops used the river corridor as a route of maneuver, cutting off settlements including Vichneve, Yuriivka, Zlauta, and Ribne from Russian control. Though small on the map, these localities functioned as artillery and armored concealment points. Ukrainian flags were subsequently reported raised in several of these positions. On the southeastern axis near Alexandrovka, Russian motorized rifle units attempted to resist the push. Under sustained pressure, settlements including Oleksivka, Orostopil, Berzove, and Ternove changed control. The fall of Dunilivka had particular logistical significance. This locality served as a key artery for Russian supply distribution in the immediate area. Its loss disrupted ammunition flows and complicated resupply operations for frontline units. A third axis involved Ukrainian forces crossing the Ichur River to penetrate Russian rear areas. The point of Dobropilia was identified as strategically important. Ukrainian elements maneuvered behind Russian defensive lines, liberating settlements including Priluki and Antonivka. Street fighting was reported in the village of Pravilna, though operational initiative remained with Ukrainian forces. Russian troops reportedly attempted to establish a fallback line along Zaliznichna, but reports described conditions of disorganization and urgency rather than structured defensive regrouping. As the situation deteriorated on the ground, Russian state-aligned media and affiliated telegram channels reported claims of victory in specific villages, including Ternivate. Video footage circulated showing Russian flags raised in what was described as captured territory. Ukrainian Southern Defense Forces and independent observers later stated that the flag was raised in an uninhabited gray zone outside the main settlement, while Ukrainian forces were simultaneously advancing beyond that area. Analysts characterize the episode as a morale-focused narrative effort amid territorial setbacks. The operational impact of the 9 to 9.5 kilometer Ukrainian advance extends beyond tactical depth. The regained territory placed the city of Polo, identified as a central Russian logistics hub in the sector, within range of standard 155mm Ukrainian artillery systems and precision-guided munitions. Military analysts emphasize that direct occupation of the city is not required for operational disruption. Artillery coverage alone can force supply unloading operations to relocate further from the front line. Previously, Russian trains reportedly unloaded ammunition at the Polo rail station for immediate distribution forward. With the Ukrainian advance, that station is now considered within potential targeting range. Russian forces may be compelled to unload supplies 40 to 50 kilometers behind the front and transport them by truck. Analysts note that Russia has faced documented shortages of tactical transport vehicles since 2022. Delays in artillery response times, extending from approximately 2 hours to as long as 6, have significant battlefield consequences in high-intensity engagements. Open-source intelligence groups estimate that within 1 week in a sector approximately 10 kilometers wide, Russian forces lost between 12 and 15 main battle tanks, including T-80BV and T-72B3 models, as well as more than 20 armored fighting vehicles. Losses also reportedly included specialized electronic warfare systems that require extended production timelines to replace. Total equipment losses in the sector are estimated at 60 to 70 million US dollars. Analysts emphasize that beyond financial cost, production capacity remains the critical constraint. If monthly tank production is outpaced by weekly losses, force regeneration becomes unsustainable. Ukrainian military observer Kostiantin Mashovets described the action as a limited stabilization operation aimed at disrupting Russian preparations for a projected Orikhiv to Zaporizhia offensive. In his February 15th assessment, he stated that Russian forces were pushed back approximately 9 kilometers from positions necessary to launch their anticipated summer operation, requiring them to restart defensive preparations. Retired Major General Mick Ryan characterized the action as a strategy of corrosion, arguing that Ukraine not only degraded Russian defensive infrastructure physically, but disrupted the decision-making cycle at higher command levels. The speed of the Ukrainian advance, relative to Russian response times, has drawn particular attention. By the time Russian command elements assessed developments and relayed information upward, Ukrainian units had already moved into subsequent positions. Analysts describe this as a decision cycle advantage, with Ukrainian forces acting faster than Russian command structures could adapt. The immediate consequence of the Zaporizhia reversal is operational uncertainty for Russian forces in the south. Military planners now face the prospect of reallocating units from other fronts to stabilize the sector. The regained Ukrainian depth narrows buffer zones, protecting logistical corridors that connect southern occupied territories. In strategic terms, the events of mid-February have shifted initiative on this portion of the front. Whether this remains localized or expands into a broader southern campaign will depend on force availability, logistics resilience, and command responsiveness in the weeks ahead. The consequences of the developments on the Zaporizhia front extend beyond immediate territorial changes and have triggered wider military, logistical, and political repercussions. The regained 9 to 9.5 kilometers have narrowed the security buffer protecting Russian-controlled logistics corridors in southern Ukraine. Analysts warn that pressure on rail supply lines linking occupied areas of Zaporizhia and Kherson has intensified. Rail transport remains central to Russian sustainment operations, and increased Ukrainian artillery reach forces adjustments in unloading points and distribution routes, increasing reliance on truck transport and extending delivery times to frontline units. Military assessments indicate that any sustained disruption to rail-based logistics in the south could complicate broader operational planning for the Russian summer campaign. Russian command structures now face the task of restoring defensive depth while compensating for equipment losses and re-establishing stable communication networks in a sector described as vulnerable to further Ukrainian maneuver. Reports of internal tension between command groupings, including elements associated with the Vostok grouping and formations operating along the Dnipro axis, have surfaced following the setback. In Russian military tradition, pre-offensive territorial losses often result in leadership scrutiny. Analysts note the possibility of command reshuffles or dismissals, although no official announcements have confirmed such actions. Beyond the Zaporizhia sector, the broader battlefield environment remains shaped by logistical strain and high casualty rates. According to independent analytical estimates referenced in the reporting, Russian losses since the beginning of the war have reached approximately 1.2 to 1.25 million personnel, including killed, seriously wounded, and missing. Total losses for both sides are estimated at approximately 1.8 million, with projections suggesting figures could approach 2 million by spring 2026. In 2025 alone, Russian forces reportedly sustained approximately 415,000 casualties, averaging 30,000 to 40,000 per month. Such rates represent one of the highest sustained monthly casualty levels in modern warfare. Drone warfare continues to define battlefield lethality. Estimates suggest a significant proportion of deaths and severe injuries are caused by unmanned aerial systems. These systems provide reconnaissance transparency across contested terrain, complicating evacuation and reinforcement efforts. Ukrainian units have reportedly targeted Russian supply chains, bridges, and railway nodes with precision strikes, contributing to shortages of ammunition, fuel, food, and potable water in certain frontline sectors. Social media footage and independent sources have documented Russian soldiers improvising under severe winter conditions, including limited access to water and food supplies. Reports also indicate disciplinary measures within Russian ranks aimed at preventing desertion. Incidents of rebellion and refusal of deployment have been cited, including a reported case involving approximately 100 soldiers at a training facility in Yekaterinburg who resisted combat assignment and were subsequently redeployed to the Luhansk front. Communications restrictions inside Russia have intensified. YouTube access has been blocked, and tighter controls have been reported on Telegram and WhatsApp. Military bloggers have referenced growing financial strain and shortages, with one stating publicly that available funds were exhausted and conditions would deteriorate further. In parallel with battlefield developments, Russian legislative changes have introduced a continuous electronic conscription mechanism, effective January 1, 2026. Under the new system, military summons can be issued electronically at any time of year and remain valid for 12 months. Individuals who receive a summons are immediately restricted from leaving the country for 30 days. Failure to report within 20 days triggers administrative penalties, including suspension of driver's licenses, restrictions on property transactions, and limitations on bank loans and business activities. Analysts interpret the policy as a means of maintaining force generation without declaring formal general mobilization. Educational deferments have also been reduced. Approximately 45,000 paid university enrollment quotas are reportedly being eliminated for the upcoming academic year, limiting traditional avenues for draft postponement. Technology sector employees, previously granted deferments, face increased administrative complexity in maintaining exemption status. Observers warn that such measures may intensify migration flows, following the departure of approximately 900,000 Russians during the partial mobilization of 2022. Current migration destinations cited include Turkey, Georgia, Armenia, Kazakhstan, Serbia, and the United Arab Emirates. Labor shortages are emerging within the Russian economy. Official data cited in the reporting indicate a deficit of approximately 2.5 million workers, including 800,000 in industrial production. With economic growth reported below 1% and inflationary pressures rising, the war economy faces structural constraints. While defense spending has expanded and arms production operates at high capacity, analysts argue that civilian sectors have weakened under sustained resource diversion. At the strategic level, Russia has reportedly increased reliance on external military supplies, including artillery ammunition and ballistic systems from North Korea and unmanned systems from Iran. While these imports provide short-term sustainment, analysts caution that they do not address internal manpower and logistics challenges. Simultaneously, Ukraine continues to pursue a strategy aimed at imposing losses exceeding Russia's monthly recruitment capacity. If Russian recruitment averages approximately 30,000 personnel per month while losses exceed 50,000, the long-term force balance becomes mathematically unfavorable. On the southern axis, the setback in Zaporizhia has raised concern regarding the security of the land corridor connecting Russian-occupied territories to Crimea. Intelligence assessments referenced in the reporting suggest that continued Ukrainian advances could threaten supply continuity toward Melitopol and Berdyansk. Reports indicate that elite Russian formations have been redeployed toward Crimea as a precautionary measure, though official confirmation remains limited. The cumulative effect of territorial reversals, communication disruptions, casualty levels, and economic strain has intensified strategic uncertainty. While Russian reserves remain significant and further counteractions remain possible, the February events in Zaporizhia represent a measurable shift in operational initiative. Military analysts emphasize that in modern warfare, initiative, the ability to determine the timing and location of engagement, can outweigh temporary material advantages. The situation remains fluid. Russian forces retain substantial manpower and artillery resources, and future offensives remain possible once seasonal conditions improve. However, the February reversal in the south has altered operational calculations for both sides. As the conflict enters its next phase, developments on the Zaporizhia front will remain a key indicator of broader strategic momentum. For continuing analysis and verified updates on the evolving situation, subscribe to our channel.